She cheated me with her best friend out of spite. Their friend caught them, so my wife told me about the betrayal herself, called me a loser, and I'm a 61-year-old individual, and I've been in a marriage with a woman who meant the world to me for 30 years. Let's refer to her as Diana. We were friends from university and shared 14 years of companionship before we tied the knot. During those years, we spent 4 years as close friends, 3 years of me attempting to win her over, and the next 7 years as a couple. Some of those years were spent apart in different regions due to our careers. Despite the challenges of time and distance, our bond stayed strong. Diana wasn't just my spouse and the mother of our kids. She was also my closest ally since university. She had a deep understanding of me, more than anyone else. That's why her betrayal hit me so hard. About 2 months ago, Diana and I went to our university reunion. The university organizes a reunion every year for the classes that graduated 42 years ago. It's a grand event with performances by famous musicians and celebrities, something that former students look forward to every year. This year, it was our turn to shine. We and our fellow alumni were excited to reconnect and see how we had all changed over time. Diana and I were particularly eager because we were among the few couples who had married and stayed together for such a long time. We walked into the gathering, eager to show off our enduring relationship, unaware that I was heading into an unexpected situation. We were enjoying ourselves, reconnecting with some of our closest friends after many years. It felt like the best time of our lives until someone approached us. Let's call him Tom. Tom had always admired Diana, and everyone in our class knew about his deep affection for her. Diana was one of the brightest students in our class, and as with any beautiful woman, she had her share of admirers. Yes, I was one too. But Tom wasn't the kind of guy who would flirt, take a chance, and then move on if it didn't work out. He was persistent. He pursued Diana throughout university and beyond, never giving up even though he knew she was in love with me. I've always been confident and didn't let his actions affect our relationship. Tom, like everyone else, knew that Diana was way out of his league, but that didn't stop him. I remember when Tom found out Diana had married me. He actually called me and claimed Diana had made a huge mistake. He said he hoped I would take care of her the way he would have. Diana and I laughed at his immature ideas and romantic fantasies. We hadn't heard from him or spoken to him since that day, until the reunion. When Tom approached us, we thought he would have moved on by now, considering it had been 42 years since university and 30 years since our marriage. However, to our shock, he was still fixated on Diana. He greeted us all with handshakes, and we returned the gesture. However, Diana chose to simply nod at him because his intense stare made her uneasy. He sat across from Diana, giving her a strange and focused look, which everyone noticed. I couldn't help but ask if he had brought anyone with him to the reunion. He replied that he was single. He mentioned he had been married briefly in his 50s but had since divorced. I expressed my sympathy saying, "I'm sorry to hear that," to which he dramatically replied, "Well, yes, you should be sorry. You took my love," followed by wild laughter. If I were younger, I might have thought about confronting him, but as we're now in our 60s, those things no longer seem important. Besides, Tom isn't exactly intimidating. He's more of a loudmouth, the type of person you wouldn't pick for anything. Although everyone heard his joke, no one responded, and you could sense the awkwardness, so we largely ignored it. But Diana became noticeably quiet. Our close university friend Rachel and I took Diana aside. We tried to lift her spirits, telling her to forget about Tom and enjoy the rest of the evening. Knowing that Diana tends to dwell on things, we both tried to ease her mind. Suddenly, Tom came over out of nowhere. I suspect he had been keeping an eye on us. To our surprise, he apologized, saying he didn't mean to upset her. Instead, he claimed he wanted to make her feel good, that despite the years and the effects of aging, she still had someone who admired her. I couldn't stand his cheesy words and told him to back off. He seemed genuinely sorry for causing discomfort. Diana asked him to leave us alone, but he insisted that Diana forgive him so we could all enjoy this last big gathering. His words made me think we should just move on from this. That night was likely the last chance to meet with old friends, so why linger on the past? Diana hugged him and told him to move on from her. We all hugged and headed to the dance floor to enjoy the party. Others joined us, and it became a fun time. Later, I noticed Rachel and Diana talking to Tom, who was standing nearby. He was joking around and dancing in a silly way. I felt relieved that everything seemed resolved, and we could look back on the night fondly. I kept an eye on them to make sure Diana was okay. Tom was whispering something in her ear, and she smiled and nodded at him. I assumed it wasn't anything inappropriate because Diana would have reacted differently. This gave me the comfort to relax and enjoy the company of other friends and classmates. An hour or so later, I noticed that Diana and Rachel were nowhere to be seen. At first, I didn't think much of it since we were all mingling. I was also catching up with others. However, when they didn't come back after a while, I started to look for them. I called them, but there was no answer. I figured the music might have drowned out their phones. After about 40 minutes, Diana returned, but she seemed different. Her appearance hadn't changed, but I could tell she was acting differently. She was unusually quiet and kept urging me to leave. Rachel joined us soon after, but Diana and Rachel didn't talk for the rest of the night. I figured they had argued about something because they avoided looking at each other. I kept asking Diana why she was upset and wanted to leave early, but she wouldn't say anything. I wanted to stay until the end, but Diana insisted we leave early. Diana stayed silent the entire drive home, which took over an hour. I kept asking if she was okay, and she just said she was tired and needed to rest. It worried me because she's usually full of energy, and seeing her upset with no explanation was unsettling. I asked if it had something to do with Rachel, but she just said no and didn't elaborate. I figured she was just tired and left her alone when we got home. While most of our friends were sharing happy pictures and chatting online about the great time they had, Diana went straight to bed and pretended to sleep. I joined her later, exhausted, and fell asleep quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep when Diana woke me up. She was crying, resting her head on my chest. I held her and asked if she was feeling emotional about seeing her old friends, but she didn't answer. She just kept crying. I held her close, showing my support since she wasn't telling me what was wrong. I let her cry it out, and when she finally stopped, she said something that shocked me. She confessed she had been unfaithful with Tom. I was speechless, unable to say anything. My mind was racing. The last I saw her, she was dancing with Tom and Rachel. Then the three of them disappeared for about 40 minutes. When Diana came back, she looked upset and insisted we leave. She said Rachel knew about it, and Rachel's anger made sense now. I couldn't speak, so Diana started explaining everything on her own. She told me that while they were dancing, Tom kept apologizing for embarrassing her, especially after she rejected him so many times. He showered her with compliments, saying that in all his travels, he'd never met a woman as amazing as her. Diana said she started believing him and fell for his apparent sincerity. He asked her to go for a walk with him. At first she said no, but he kept insisting, saying it would be their last chance, and she deserved to hear his true feelings. She wanted to hear what he had to say, so she agreed to walk with him on the campus, seeking some peace and quiet. On the campus, Tom confessed his feelings, declaring his lifelong love and calling her the most incredible woman on earth. She repeated the things he said, but the message was the same. Diana admitted she was foolish and drunk, falling for his words. He held her hand as they walked, and she said she felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders, making her feel strangely at ease. I won't go into the details of what she shared about what happened, but she told me everything. Absolutely everything. She even mentioned that halfway through her guilt made her stop, and she pushed him away. My mind was foggy, and my body felt numb. She nudged me, hoping for a reaction, but I stayed silent. I asked her to give me a minute. She kept crying and apologizing. Finally, I told her to sleep, and we'd talk in the morning. She held on to me tightly, saying she was scared of losing me. I just closed my eyes and lay there, replaying the events in my mind over and over. I was thinking about everything until I remembered something odd. Tom gave me a strange smile when Diana returned. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now I realized it was his victory smile, showing he had finally won her over. That thought made me feel angry and disgusted. I was too upset to feel sorry for myself, and the idea of sleeping next to her was unbearable. She had cried herself to sleep, so I quietly got out of bed, packed my laptop, wallet, and some essentials, and left the house. I loved that woman. We had been married for 30 years, and I couldn't imagine life without her. We had kids and a life together, but I couldn't stay. I knew her well, and if I stayed until morning, she would have convinced me not to leave. so I checked into a motel and blocked her number along with all her social media. By the time I finally fell asleep, it was already morning. My phone kept ringing with calls from my kids. Diana and I have two children, a 28-year-old son and a 25-year-old daughter. They're both in college and share an apartment. After reading many stories, I realized I acted too quickly by ghosting Diana that night. I should have planned better to keep control. I've seen stories where people pretend everything is fine while secretly planning revenge or exposing the affair. But I couldn't have pretended with Diana after what she did. She wasn't just my partner. She was my best friend and my other half. Even if I tried to deceive her, she would have seen through it, and I couldn't pretend in front of her. I never expected Diana to cheat, so I never thought of how to handle such a situation. So when my kids called, I had no plan for what to say, but I had to talk to one of them before they reported me missing. I called my son because he's more level-headed than my daughter. I told him there was no easy way to say it, but his mother had cheated on me the previous night with her old admirer, stalker, or whatever you want to call him. I said I needed time to process it. He was shocked to hear that his own mother had done such a thing. He knew we had a loving family and a strong relationship, and now that image was shattered. My kids, like our relatives and friends, had always admired our close-knit, strong, and proud family. He couldn't believe his mother would do this, and kept asking for details, wanting to know everything in order. But I knew telling him everything would crush him before he even had a chance to live his life. I wished it was all a joke, but I told him that his mom had confessed her betrayal. He's 28 and has dealt with heartbreak before, but I know this is different. I asked him not to tell anyone until I did. I sent a message to my daughter, saying I was stressed about work and would be out of town for a while, which stopped the calls. So here's where things stood. My daughter thought I was away for work, but my son and Diana knew I had left her. Over the next few days, I searched online for the best lawyers and a way out of this mess. That's when I found an online community where many men shared stories like mine. I read about how they had planned revenge and taken action against their cheating partners, including their anger at the affair partner. I understood their feelings, I really did, but seeking revenge on Diana was the last thing I wanted. I still loved her deeply, and I couldn't destroy her life. I didn't want to, but I also couldn't be with her again. Reconciliation wasn't an option. I wasn't sure how I'd get through this, or if I'd ever recover. I had work, my kids, and my finances to deal with. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer and planned to update you when I made progress. Hey everyone, thank you for your support. While reading your comments, I realized I missed some important details. Both Diana and I were management consultants, but in our late 40s, we left our full-time jobs. Diana followed her passion for writing, and I became a consultant for startups as a freelancer. I don't have a fixed office. One of you asked if Diana might show up at my work. Since I sometimes work from home or visit clients, I work with multiple clients at once. So far, Diana hasn't found me. As I mentioned before, I'm nearing 60, and we've been planning our retirement for a long time. We've been saving to buy a beach house in the countryside for our retirement, and we were supposed to buy it soon. We even found some properties and talked to the owners. Thankfully, we hadn't bought anything yet. Otherwise, it would have made things more complicated. Diana has been trying to contact me since I left. I met with the lawyer the day after my first post, and he advised me to tell the kids about the separation since they're adults. We also talked about splitting assets, and I decided to divide everything evenly between Diana and myself. I'm not looking to get back at her by taking her money. She's entitled to half of everything, and she earned it. She also earned the separation. I know her well. She might even give up her claim to the money to keep the family together. While the divorce papers were being prepared, I met with my kids. I asked my son to bring his sister to a restaurant without telling her I'd be there. He agreed. My daughter was upset when she saw me and started asking questions. One of her first questions was if I had cheated on Mom, since she knew I had cut off contact with her. She was clearly upset, which hurt, but I had to stay strong for them and for what I was about to reveal. I calmed her down and reassured her that I wasn't with anyone else. Then I slowly told them the truth. Although my son already knew, he didn't know what my next steps were. My daughter was devastated to learn that her mom had been unfaithful. She had been living with Diana for the past month since I left. She hugged me and apologized for being angry. They both asked if I could consider giving the marriage another chance, but I made it clear I was going through with the divorce. They both broke down. Seeing their tears was painful, but they understood my hurt. They promised to support me through this tough time. I assured them I was leaving their mom, not them. My daughter told me Diana hadn't been eating or sleeping well. She's been going back and forth between crying and frantically trying to reach me. She even visited some of my clients' offices to find me, but they all told her I hadn't been there in 2 weeks. When my daughter asked if something had happened between us since it was the first time I'd acted like this, Diana didn't answer. Instead, she just kept crying and locked herself in her room. I asked my daughter to stay with her mom until the divorce was final. I could see their sadness turning to anger when we talked about their mom. They felt let down by her, too. I understood. They had lost something, too. Our family was broken, and it was because of one person. But I didn't want them to hate their mother, so I told them to support her. Here's something you won't believe. A few days later, I got a message from Tom asking about Diana. He said if I was divorcing her after finding out about her infidelity, he would take her. I replied that Diana was free to make her own choices. Then I blocked him. I'm sure he was trying to provoke me, but I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't going to fall for his games. I didn't marry or love or trust him. All of that was with Diana, who betrayed me, and that hurt deeply. I wasn't insecure. If she wanted him, she could have him. I didn't care. The divorce papers should be arriving today, and I'm waiting for my daughter to call with Diana's reaction. I'll update you once the divorce is finalized. In the meantime, I have a lot to sort out. My assets, retirement, and my kids' futures. Hey everyone, it's been a while since I last updated you. I'm sorry about that. I had a lot on my plate. First of all, my divorce is final. When Diana got the papers, she didn't handle it well. She lost control. Until then, she had been living in a fantasy, thinking I was just angry and would come back once I cooled down. But that illusion shattered when she got the papers. She insisted that my lawyer arrange a meeting, but he refused. He said she was getting more than she deserved. She said she didn't want the assets, just me. I told you I knew her. She wanted to meet me before signing, confident she could change my mind with just one conversation. She was right. If I had met her, I might have changed my mind. I still loved her and couldn't stand to see her in pain, but I couldn't sacrifice my self-respect. She took me for granted and destroyed our family for what? I won't go into that dark place. All I'll say is that I couldn't live like that anymore. My daughter wanted to meet with me right away. She told me her mom's condition had worsened to the point she had to be hospitalized. Diana had fallen into a deep depression and refused to take any medication or supplements. She was admitted to the hospital and put on a liquid diet because she wasn't eating. I know some of you might think I'm being cold and selfish, questioning whether I ever loved Diana, given how I seem indifferent to her declining health. My answer is simple. Have you ever been betrayed? If not, you can't understand the pain I'm in. Saying I loved my wife would be an understatement. I practically worshipped her. I was her biggest supporter, her #1 fan, and we had been together for over 30 years. She's the mother of our kids. Tom was right about one thing. Finding a woman like Diana is rare. She's smart, talented, compassionate, and everything you'd want in a partner. That's why I treated her so well. But what did she do in return? She hit me where I was weakest. I never thought she'd betray me, especially not with Tom. A few days after Diana got the divorce papers, Rachel contacted me. She asked how I was doing and wanted to know about Diana. I told her we were getting a divorce. She didn't seem surprised and said she knew why. Later, she called me, and during our chat, Rachel asked how I found out about the affair. I told her Diana had confessed. She was sorry and told me she had tried to warn Diana about Tom. She had told Diana not to go with him, but Diana didn't listen. Rachel shared something that made me more sure of my decision. Her version of the events was slightly different from Diana's. According to Rachel, she and Diana were happily dancing when Tom joined them and started flirting with Diana. He whispered something in her ear, which Diana said was an apology. Rachel was uncomfortable and tried to step in, but she noticed that Diana seemed to enjoy Tom's attention. When Tom suggested going for a walk, Diana looked to Rachel for advice. Rachel was against it since everyone knew Tom was trouble. But after a while, Diana left with him anyway. Rachel wasn't too worried because Diana seemed interested. Rachel was having fun with friends when she realized Diana hadn't come back. Worried for her friends, she went to look for them. Can you believe where she found them? In the gym locker room. But Diana told me they were on the campus. Rachel said she caught them in the act, and they only stopped when Diana saw Rachel approaching. So it wasn't Diana's guilt that made her stop. It was Rachel's interruption. Until now, I had some respect for Diana because she owned up to her mistake and told me about it quickly. It gave me closure, even though her betrayal hurt deeply. I believed her story that she was drunk, and her conscience made her stop. But now I knew Diana didn't cheat because she was drunk. She did it because she wanted to. The gym is at least a 25-minute walk from where we were, and the locker rooms are deep inside. You don't just end up there by accident. It was deliberate. After hearing Rachel's side, she asked if I could see myself giving Diana another chance, since she had confessed and been honest about her mistake. The thing is, Rachel didn't know that Diana's confession was different, and I didn't tell her. Despite Diana's misery, she had lied to me, and that's when I lost all respect for her. Meanwhile, my kids told me Diana's condition was getting worse, and she was close to self-harm. Hearing that, I called Rachel and told her about our previous conversation, where Diana had given me a different story. I asked Rachel to visit Diana and talk openly with her. Diana had been holding in her secret, causing her immense suffering. I also told Rachel to let Diana know I now knew the real story and had no intention of forgiving her or taking her back. It was in Diana's best interest to focus on her health because I knew she was hurting herself, hoping to win me back. After all, I knew her well, didn't I? Rachel visited Diana and gave me an update. While Diana hasn't fully recovered from her depression and weakness, my daughter said she's doing much better. Plus, Diana signed the divorce papers, which was a huge relief for me. My plan now is to finish my work and go on a solo trip. I've given up on the idea of settling down in one place because that would drive me crazy. I know I haven't handled this as well as some others who've been in similar situations, but I've done my best. Let's see what the future holds. I'll keep you posted. Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. It's been over a year since my last update. I wish I could say time has flown by, but it hasn't felt that way for me. I spent a few months in a motel and then rented a small apartment until my divorce was finalized. As for work, I gradually shifted to clients who allowed me to work remotely. Regarding the money Diana and I had saved for our retirement home, she got half, and I gave my share to my kids. I don't need it, and they're responsible enough to use it wisely. As for Diana, she's still in therapy. Rachel checks on her regularly, and sometimes checks on me too. She shared something surprising about Diana that I never expected. Keep in mind, this is from Rachel, who still supports Diana, so take it with a grain of salt. But she has no reason to lie. Here's what she told me. Brace yourself. Even though I kept saying I knew Diana well, even after her betrayal, hearing this made me question if I ever knew her at all. I always thought Diana was strong and resilient, but loneliness took a toll on her. Diana started talking to Tom, and he expressed his love for her until he found out about our divorce. As soon as he knew, he started acting strange and eventually ghosted her. Diana was heartbroken to find out Tom stopped talking to her after she told him about the divorce. She reminded him of his promises, saying he'd be with her no matter what. It turned out he was just playing with her for a casual fling, which he got. He told her he couldn't commit to marriage or a serious relationship with her because she was too strong-willed. For those who know Diana, it's hard to believe she begged Tom for a relationship. She hit rock bottom, and everyone knew Tom wasn't a good guy. Tom showed his true colors by admitting he was only interested in the physical side, while Diana wanted more. He said he had a live-in girlfriend and was happy with that. It seems all his talk of love and admiration was fake. When they argued, he ended it with a hurtful remark. He taunted Diana by saying he tricked her and thought she was smart, but he outsmarted her, implying he was the clever one. This drove her deeper into depression, realizing she lost everything by falling for his lies. The last update I got about Diana was a few weeks ago. My daughter had been staying with Diana since I left. She needed someone with her to help her cope. But after living with her for a year, my daughter realized she couldn't stay with her mom anymore because Diana had become difficult. Diana, once strong and stable, had turned into someone insecure and erratic, always needing attention. She's also become delusional and confused. Diana has turned into a controlling and clingy mother. She constantly calls and texts my kids, and if they don't respond right away, she panics. She even asked my son to move in with her until he got married, but he said no. She's been pressuring my daughter to stay home instead of going out or traveling. My kids are grown. They can't be controlled. When my daughter tried to talk to Diana about her behavior, Diana would break down, saying she was scared of losing them after losing me. My kids reassured her they wouldn't abandon her and were trying their best to help her through her depression. But they warned her that if she kept being so controlling, they might have to reconsider. This led to arguments, with the kids accusing her of not supporting them during their toughest times. This behavior is new to me, and my kids are just as confused. In the end, they had to tell her it was her actions that broke our family. What was once a happy and secure home is now shattered. It was hard for her to accept that her own children blamed her for everything. My daughter moved out 2 weeks ago. She told me she had done everything she could to help Diana, but she couldn't put her life on hold. I think my daughter made the right choice. She needs to live her life, and Diana needs to get her own life back together. While some might take pleasure in seeing their cheating ex-wife suffer in their 20s or 30s, I can't find any joy in this. I genuinely feel sorry for her. Her bad choices have doomed her to a life of misery. I hope she can find her old self again, a strong, confident woman who doesn't need someone like Tom for support. As for my own journey, I've spent the last year living in 7 different countries, exploring cultures, tasting new foods, and diving into new ways of life. It's been a great experience. At first, I was disappointed that my retirement plans had changed. I always imagined spending my golden years peacefully with Diana. But now, I find joy in experiencing different cultures and lifestyles. I've met amazing people around the world. To be clear, I haven't started a new relationship, and I'm not looking for one right now. I'm open to whatever life brings, and I'll update you if anything big happens. Hello everyone, I'm sorry I haven't posted any updates in the last few years. Honestly, not much has happened in the last 2.5 years, except for my travels to more than a dozen countries and my new love for painting. I started this thread to share my story about my cheating wife, and I didn't think there was much point in talking about my travels, so I didn't update. But something happened recently that made me want to post an update. Last month, after 4 years, I saw Diana again. This meeting happened because my son is getting married. Yes, he found the love of his life and decided to get married. He called me 2 months before the wedding and said he wanted Diana and me to meet the bride's parents. At first, I was hesitant and suggested I could just meet them at the wedding. But then I realized this wasn't about me. It was about doing what was right as a father. The bride's parents hosted a dinner for us a week before the wedding. I hadn't confirmed I would go, but I decided at the last minute to join. It was tough seeing Diana in that setting, as I would have preferred one of us not be there. But I knew I had to be there for my son. When I arrived, Diana seemed surprised. She looked different, and her eyes showed she had been through a lot. She smiled politely, but I could tell she was tense. Over the years, she always kept her long, thick hair, even as we aged. But it seemed like she had aged more than I expected in those 4 years. Interestingly, they sat us next to each other at the table, making me think our son hadn't told them this would be our first meeting in years. It wasn't an issue in front of everyone else. She stayed quiet, but when we got a moment to talk alone, she commented that I looked healthier and happier. I agreed, saying it was because I cut out all the negativity from my life. This caught her off guard, and she quickly looked around to make sure no one heard us. She asked if I was in a relationship, but I dodged the question, saying my relationship status wasn't her concern. During our conversation, I barely made eye contact, focusing on everyone else. After dinner, when it was time to go, I said goodbye to everyone with hugs, but I just nodded to Diana, telling her to take care. I don't think she expected that because she stood up when I was saying goodbye to everyone. It happened quickly, so I don't think it was too awkward for anyone else. Surprisingly, my interaction with Diana was uneventful. She seemed either intimidated by me or too nervous to talk much. Whether she was overthinking or not, I didn't think about it much. After leaving and stepping outside, my son walked with me and offered for me to stay with him for a few days, but I declined, saying I'd call. I drove to my hotel. By the way, I don't have a permanent home. I'm usually out of town, and when I'm in town, I stay at a motel. Switching to a nomadic life after being a family man for 30 years was tough, but I've gotten used to it, and I'm enjoying it. Besides my family, I have another update. I now have a companion. Yes, during my trip to Vienna 2 years ago, I met Claire, who's 55 years old. She had recently left a bad relationship and was enjoying her first solo trip. We met while hiking up a mountain, We became friends because neither of us was looking for a romantic relationship. After Vienna, I was heading to Germany while she was going to France. We kept in touch for 8 months and eventually decided to plan our travels together. For the last year and a half, we've been traveling to over 10 countries. We became travel companions and didn't rush into anything physical or emotional at first. We both took our time getting to know each other and agreed from the start that we didn't want to get married. For now, we're just enjoying traveling and exploring new places. My kids knew about Claire, but decided not to tell Diana, thinking it might upset her and trigger her depression again. After getting back to the hotel, I called my son to explain why I didn't stay with him. I told him Claire was with me, and I didn't want to leave her alone. I asked if Claire could come to the wedding. He was happy but worried about Diana's reaction. I told him Claire should be there because she's my partner and should meet my family. My son added my daughter to the call to get her opinion, but mostly to discuss it with us. She agreed that Claire should meet the family. The wedding was in a few days, so I spent the time showing Claire around the city since it was her first time in Seattle. On the wedding day, as soon as we arrived, I noticed Diana already staring at me. She looked upset when she saw me holding hands with Claire. I had warned Claire that Diana might not take it well, but she assured me she could handle it. This was the first time I saw how controlling Diana had become since we separated. She rushed over and grabbed my arm, trying to pull me aside. I firmly told her I didn't want to talk alone. She asked if Claire was my girlfriend or if I planned to marry her. I said it wasn't her business and asked her to leave us alone because the guests were arriving, and some noticed her tears and anger. She insisted she didn't care about anyone else and needed to settle this now. My daughter stepped in and tried to calm her mom down, but Diana refused to go with her. We told her she was causing a scene, but she shouted that she didn't care. At that point, my usually calm daughter turned into someone else. She didn't just lose her temper, she gave Diana a stern talking to that I never expected. In a low but commanding voice, she said, Mom, you were supposed to walk into this wedding with Dad and be with him, but you chose someone else, so either accept it and move on right now, or I'll make sure you're thrown out before it starts." I almost wanted to step in, as any parent would when they see their child upset, but my daughter was tougher than I was when it came to her mom. She pointed her finger at Diana and meant every word. I felt Diana's grip on my arm loosen. I saw her face twitch as she let go, staring at me for a few seconds. In that time, her expression went from anger to betrayal to sadness. She didn't say anything, but her face showed all the emotions. After that, she walked away. Needless to say, she didn't introduce herself to Claire. On the bright side, my daughter apologized to Claire, who hugged us both. I reassured her there was no need to apologize. My daughter is strong, and I'm proud of her. I could see my daughter was emotional when she said, "It's on her, Dad. We've suffered enough. She needs to move on or leave you alone." Diana had made everyone's life difficult, yet she expected sympathy from some friends. My kids don't have a family home for holidays, and I take responsibility for that. During the rest of the wedding, Diana was clearly upset that our kids supported me. She stood in a corner, or looked more excluded than a mother of the groom should. She didn't even join us for the family photo. Rachel called me a few days later and said Diana was hurt to see me move on so quickly while she was still single. I told Rachel that my kids and I are done with Diana's drama, and she's on her own. She can do what she wants. I just want to enjoy the rest of my life in peace. I'm thinking of staying closer to my kids and giving them a place to gather for holidays, even though they're adults. The wedding made me realize a new chapter in life is coming, and I might become a grandparent. But I won't share that with Diana, and I'm okay with that. We'll see if Claire is willing when the time comes. I want to thank you all for the advice and the real stories you shared. I hope you all stay true to your partners, not just for yourselves, but for your kids. Life is good, and there's always more to enjoy. Take care.